So, Alex, welcome to Insomnia Insight, and thanks so much for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure. Even before we get started, I think you really give an outlet for people who really, you know, feel kind of embarrassed or anything about their sleep-related problems. And, especially from someone who's as qualified as you, that means a lot.
Anytime, it's since I started the channel, it's been I've gotten so much positive feedback. It's so much fun. And by the way, before we start talking about kind of today's topic, you bring up a good one, which is so many people out there have trouble sleeping, insomnia, etc., and are kind of embarrassed to talk about it, and which creates this scenario where actually millions of people have this problem, but a lot of people feel isolated. So it's so important to talk about it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So this said, for people tuning in here, I think you and I connected many months ago, actually, and since then, more recently, we've talked about these kind of sleep transition-related events that you've been having. So actually, just tell us a little bit about them, and then we'll just ask you questions, and we'll talk about it.
Absolutely. So about 3 years ago, I was in bed and kind of just stressing about how much sleep I was going to get because I had to be up for work the next morning. Eventually, that anxiety calmed down, but I was still really concerned about how much sleep I was going to get. I can remember every time I was about to fall asleep, my brain would like suddenly turn on and kind of like let me know, oh, I was going to get 7 hours of sleep. Oh, I was going to get 6 hours of sleep, and kind of just, went on from there. And, really because of that, my mind was, really checking in to see if I was asleep. And every time that I successfully began to fall asleep, due to that heightened level of arousal and worry about sleep, my brain just kind of recognized that I was falling asleep and just, really woke me up to proclaim that I was falling asleep. And I guess the biggest part there was that, it got to a point where I was just kind of like, all right, whatever. And the biggest part was just that I really wasn't even focusing on it. It just kind of happened. And because of that interference in falling asleep, my anxiety really shifted from how much sleep I was going to get. And I really started focusing on that kind of like that awareness, that sudden awareness of, when I was going to be able to, oh, I'm about to fall asleep. And, that created a whole host of issues, and really caused me to worry about whether I was going to be able to sleep again, and created even more anxiety and more episodes that I was of becoming aware that I was falling asleep. And for a while I just kind of wondered what was happening, and it really wasn't until recently that I read Martin Reed's forum, and it was just all the thanks in the world to people like that as well. On his forum, he was mentioning there was a person that was dealing with a similar situation that I was, and Martin said that what could be happening to that particular person is that you have a heightened level of arousal and worry about sleep. And so when you get into bed, your mind is constantly checking to see if you're asleep. And that self-monitoring makes it more difficult to sleep. And as soon as you try and as soon as you do start to fall asleep, the brain recognizes it and then suddenly wakes you up to like proclaim its success at falling asleep. And so with all that being said, eventually after trying a lot of different things, I just simply tried facing it, or, letting that hyperarousal happen. And in doing so, it became a lot easier to fall asleep. Once I knew how to stop the hyperarousal from continuing to affect my sleep, very rarely did I have episodes of it. And when I did, I simply let it happen. And the comfort of knowing that in facing it or letting it happen, I was able to transition into sleep.
Exactly. And it started like about 3 years ago. And for how long was it kind of like a real issue?
Well, probably about 4 months. I mean, you guys always talk about, you always get to a certain point where like you've tried everything you possibly can, and then you realize that nothing really is nothing can get you to sleep, right? The more you want it, the less you get.
Yeah.
And so eventually to a point I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna, maybe it's like a fear, I'm just gonna face it. And in letting it actually happen, it was kind of like sleep was on the other side, or even just like this transition into sleep became easier once, I fully experienced it.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, just for our people tuning in here to kind of get the picture again, what were the things that you tried to make it stop?
Oh goodness, the pink elephant thing for sure. I fell into that trap pretty quick of like, all right, I'm gonna go into bed and I'm gonna, when it happens, I'm not gonna think about it when it happens. And anytime you try and put any sort of conscious effort into trying to make yourself prevent that kind of thing from happening, that's when it gets a lot worse. So I tried that. I tried, just breathing through and, just really anything that I thought was going to help. But, like I said, you get to a point where you realize that anything that you consciously try to do to prevent it is just going to make more of it.
Absolutely. I think that for anybody listening here, such an important insight that when you're doing anything with the direct intention of like stopping a thought, blocking a thought, changing an emotion, it just makes it worse, really. But okay, cool. So now, and so things, I remember you emailed me maybe 2-3 weeks ago and you said like things have been getting better, but then you had some questions, some other questions that I felt like I didn't completely kind of resolve. So at this point in time, thoughts, questions right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have two primary ones, and then I just that thought were pretty important. The first of which was, I think before our earlier correspondence in February kind of maybe led you to believe that it was maybe hypnic jerks, and perhaps, so in thinking about that, it wasn't really the way I thought it should have been. From my standpoint, knowing what I read on Martin Reed's forum, it kind of sounds like this is more hyperarousal. I mean, is that fair to say that this is more just a bad case of hyperarousal, of just suddenly realizing that you're falling asleep?
Yeah, I think the short answer is simply yes. I think what you read on Martin's forum and the way you describe it is, in my belief, exactly what's happening. It's simply you're paying so much attention to that transition to sleep that just as you're about to fall into sleep, you become aware of that, and then that just like alerts you right there, and then you can feel like you're kind of being jolted out of sleep, or you feel an energy rush, or just being kicked out of sleep, something like that. So I think you're absolutely right. And for those listeners here, hypnic jerk is kind of similar, meaning it's like when you're transitioning into sleep and then your body just suddenly jerks. Those are very common, but yeah, that wasn't really what was happening to you. You just have this kind of sudden awareness or whatnot. Yep.
All right, yeah, and that's really helpful to know as well. I think the biggest part in that is, when you're even when you're not subconsciously thinking about it and it still happens, it really pinpoints like it's got to be something that hyperarousal. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
My second question, and this kind of is one of my more important ones. Obviously, now that you kind of know a little bit more, we were able to kind of break that down again. Martin Reed, wherever you are, man, really appreciate you helping me break that wall of explanation there. But I guess my question is, you're a real expert at what it takes to get to sleep and what it takes to interrupt that transition into sleep. So I guess my question is, by letting the hyperarousal episodes happen, will I be, is that, because that's kind of what's worked for me in the past. By letting the hyperarousal episodes happen, will I be able to get to sleep? Because by letting the hyperarousal happen, it will allow my brain to transition me into sleep. I guess I kind of see the whole transition into sleep and what's the hyperarousal portion that I'm having of kind of like driving down an interstate and having to pay a toll. So like if obviously the drive on the interstate is my journey into transitioning into sleep, the toll booth is my hyperarousal, and paying the toll is like letting the hyperarousal happen. So if I pay the toll, I will be allowed to continue to drive to my destination, which is falling asleep. But if I don't pay the toll and try to find another way around the toll booth, I won't be allowed to continue my drive. So I guess I kind of related it that way. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, by letting that hyperarousal, happen, will it allow my brain to transition me into sleep?
Yeah, I think I have something to share that will be helpful. And by the way, my standard disclaimer here, because now we're getting more specific here, not medical advice here, just sharing thoughts. Anybody out there, if you have concerns about your health, talk to your doctor. But here are my thoughts on this. So going back to your analogy, let's say, you're driving on the interstate and your destination is sleep and you're kind of like driving towards sleep. Do you see this kind of awareness that happens as being a toll booth that should be there, or that kind of shouldn't be there?
I see it as a toll booth that shouldn't be there.
Exactly. And when you are stopping to pay the toll booth, that you shouldn't even have to do that. It should, exactly, right. Yeah, I think, okay. I think when you are letting it happen, if you will, what you are doing is you are seeing that by doing nothing, you will fall asleep, which is very different from when you're trying all these things. Because if let's say, if you try to take some deep breaths and then this happens, so you take some more deep breaths and it happens, and then you take some more deep breaths and then eventually fall asleep, you can easily fall into this thinking of saying, wow, it's good I did that deep breathing because at least finally I fell asleep, which is faulty, which is, you're just creating an unhelpful belief, which is that you can actually manipulate these events, or you can have them happen less. But when you're quote unquote just letting them happen, then eventually you'll see that, okay, I don't have to do anything. Even if I don't do anything, I will fall asleep. And I think that reduces the hyperarousal, and eventually kind of like, by not paying the toll booth, if you will, by just like, I don't know, speeding past it, it kind of goes away. I have more to share, but did that make sense?
A little bit, yeah. If I guess, because it's weird. Like, obviously, when I knew how to stop something like this from happening, like you told me back in February, like I didn't ever experience, very rarely did I ever experience any more hyperarousal, because I guess I took comfort in knowing that I knew how to beat it, and or how to get past it maybe. And so as of recently, I was just kind of thinking like, okay, I guess in the short sense, a lot of my anxiety really stemmed from knowing that there was a strategy out there that was gonna kind of help me beat this thing, I guess, without actually putting any effort into doing that.
I think, okay, I think I see. Let's explore this. I think if I'm hearing this correctly, that you found that you kind of figured out something you could do to prevent this from happening. Is that correct?
Correct.
Got it. But what you were doing was actually sort of a non-action.
Correct.
Exactly. I see. Well, here's my thinking, and let me know what you think, if this makes sense or not. But the actual, to me, the learning point when somebody has these type of events is that there's actually nothing you can do. But anything you try to do to prevent it actively will make it happen more. And it is when you see that actually kind of an acceptance, like there's nothing I can do, that leads you to kind of the final resolution, when you realize I have no control over it, and it may or may not happen. And if it happens, that's fine. If it doesn't happen, that's good. I think that's kind of the final step towards not having them at all, or not caring if you have them at all, which is a little bit different from what I'm hearing from you, where you felt like you were actually actively doing something, which in a way can prevent someone from that final step of not having any concerns about it. Now, uh, did that make any sense?
It did. Especially that last part about, maybe that's the reason why I'm circling back to this. Is just because I can't, for some reason I can't wrap my brain around, not, I guess, being in control of the situation.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm kind of, this may be a repetition, but I think the way I see it is like you kind of felt that you found something you could actively do to prevent it from happening. And that can, in a way, perpetuate the anxiety because you feel like I have to do this forever to make it not happen when the answer is really not, when I do nothing at all, that's when it goes away.
Right. So I guess, in short, to kind of summarize kind of what you're saying is that, this really isn't a problem unless you make it one.
Yeah, that 100% correct.
All right. Yeah, because that's that is very comforting to know. Is sleep is a very paradoxical thing, and in all my research, I've come to really see that that's something that's very evident. The more you want it, less is more. Kind of is it's a really good motto to live by. Less is more when it comes to trying to give effort towards solving your sleep problems.
Absolutely. And let me share like kind of a semi sidetrack here, but something I think is very pertinent. I read this book recently. It's called like metacognitive therapy, which was part of it was really good, but it had this analogy in it. And it talked about this, I don't know if it was real or imagined, like tribe that live in the Amazon jungle. And their belief was that if they didn't, wait up all night, stay up all night, then the sun would not rise. That was their belief, which created kind of a lot of anxiety because they felt like like the guard was like, if I fell asleep on my watch, then the world will end. And then the author was like, so how can these people, challenge their belief? Because they've always done this, and the fact that they've always stood guard, and the sun has always come up, that's kind of proves that they have to keep doing this. So then the point becomes, the only way they can like realize that they don't have to do this is not do anything at all, and then realize that, whoa, nobody stood guard overnight, the sun still rose, we don't have to do anything. And that's kind of like such a relief. And that, I think that plays that's so important when it comes to insomnia, because a lot of people feel like I have to do this or else. The only way to kind of challenge that belief is not do anything and realize that nothing happens. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it kind of sounds like if you don't do anything about it, it'll just self-correct itself.
Yeah, when you don't do anything and nothing happens, if you will, or when you don't do anything, you will see that you didn't have to do anything, which was kind of the point there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you kind of saying? Are you saying that so even if I go to bed and this awareness happens, I'll be able to fall asleep even if this awareness continues to happen?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, this is kind of general advice, like taking your situation as an example, but what I hear talking to you, Alex, is that you have felt that you have kind of actively pushed through this reflex, and that's why it hasn't happened so much, when in fact, maybe you have just kind of perpetuated a belief that you have to push through it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it's a really good way of looking at it.
So, and by the way, if you feel free to like listen through this again at a later point, and hopefully my analogy will be like even more crystal clear. But I think you certainly got it, and I think I got you too. So cool. Now, yeah, tell me, other questions, or does this feel like we kind of covered it?
Sure. Well, I guess I'm just kind of wondering, um, you know, anxiety wise, I mean, I kind of feel like it's always kind of, um, I guess, kind of correlated. The more anxiety I typically have about the situation, the more that it happens. But I guess, I guess I just kind of needed that closure that even if this continues to happen, um, you know, you're going to be able to sleep through it.
Yeah, that's, with these kind of sleep transition events, which again, we talked about how what you're experiencing is not a hypnic jerk, but it's a little bit similar, like, and there are other type of like sleep transitional events is like, they can be very scary and very confusing and bizarre, etc. But, but typically, once you've fallen asleep, then they don't bother you that much again. So yeah, these things cannot, they cannot lead to you like losing the ability to sleep or like affect your health or anything like that. No.
So I guess, yeah, because my question there would be, in doing nothing, do you think that, because obviously that I kind of see it as like it's kind of like an awareness, right? Like once you've experienced it, you can't unexperience something. So do you think this might be something that kind of carries with me for a while, having this awareness, or is it kind of more like, you know once once you let it happen, and see that you can fall asleep, then you're not going to have any more of them?
I think, here are my thoughts on this is that if somebody like yourself can get to a point where you don't wonder if it's going to happen again, you don't even, you don't wonder why it's happening, you don't wonder if it's going to happen again, you don't wonder if it's going to happen in 10 years or in 5 years, or if you're ever, when you stop even kind of asking yourself those questions, it'll go away. When you have kind of like lingering like questions about why is it happening, is it going to happen again, then it's more likely to happen again because you're thinking about it.
It's interesting that connect between psychological processes and how it can increase or decrease our sleep. I think that's really something that's kind of underrated and not really discussed in today's kind of world.
Absolutely. It's, yeah, there's so much confusion in the sleep world. Um, the sleep hygiene and all the things that people tell you to do, like almost all of that just serves to make things worse. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I greatly appreciate your time, and kind of giving them insight on really what's going on, and I really appreciate the closure.
Anytime, Max. Thanks for your time and thanks for your support, and stay in touch.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
You too.